loves. You're listening to the Be Well, Beautiful People podcast, the show that inspires you to live your best joy-filled life by centering healing and liberation above all. I'm your host, Demarra West, and it is a privilege to be in sacred space with you all. Today's episode is part of our Alchemizing Trauma for Community Impact series, sponsored by the Love Building, H&B Building Services, and the Lit Bar. In this series, we're highlighting incredible Detroit leaders who have been alchemizing personal and community trauma into powerful fuel for impactful work in our Detroit community and beyond. My hope is these conversations inspire you to step fully into your power so that you can discover or further ignite your healing journey, which ultimately helps to heal the world. I'm here with Keesa Johnson, an award-winning, human-centered systems designer and food systems strategy design specialist at MSU Center for Regional Food Systems. Keesa is dedicated to advancing equity and access in Michigan food systems through her work in policy advocacy, co-design, and capacity building within local food councils across the state. She's a graduate with honors in sustainability and design leadership from the University of Michigan. Keesa brings a unique approach to her work, incorporating African and Indigenous methodologies to foster healing and transformation in communities. Keesa, I am so glad that you're here with me today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yes, we're about to get into it. So today, we're going to be talking about how equitable food systems can serve as a powerful tool for healing trauma and fostering community empowerment. But before we do that and dive into all of the explorations, let's ground in this quote by Gwendolyn Brooks, who said, "We are each other's harvest. We are each other's business. We are each other's magnitude and bond." Thank you so much for being here, Queen. Amen, amen, right? We could just drop the mic and go home. Come on now.
She says it all.
But you about to say some stuff, right? Okay. We can't drop the mic yet. We can't do it yet. So Keesa, let's begin with you sharing with the audience what brought you to human-centered design work. And ultimately, for those who aren't familiar with human-centered design, what is it?
It's funny. I believe I was always raised in a very a very art-centered world, as well as leadership in community and technology. I was around it so much in my life, but I was really grounded in being of service to other people. My mom used to say this all the time, and my dad, he would say it in different variation. And I know I'm saying it's a quote. It's about like being on this earth. Like, what are you here for? Like, I was always taught that life has a layaway plan, and I've like anything that I did, it was about like being of service, and that meant that my service was how I paid rent to live on this earth. And so that was like really ingrained in me for a long time.
That's that Ella Baker quote.
Yes.
Come on now.
Thank you.
Come on now.
Thank you. Ella Baker.
Rent is the service we pay to live.
Thank you for that.
Right. Our service is the rent we pay to live.
Mom, they'll say, all the time, like they were in service. Like I'm a child of two therapists too. That like people have to understand like how I came into this world and this earth, and like how I was positioned and situated kind of helped me be the person that I am today. I was I was a theater brat. I would create and make things, design things, whether it was like puppetry, lights, art. Like, so art and design was like a real huge part of my life.
Yeah.
But then I was also like very good with technology and math. And within my like school system, how I was raised and I was coming up, then because I'm from the city of Muskegon Heights, which sits on Muskegon, which sits on Lake Michigamme. A lot of the educators that were in my life and a lot of people in my church or in my neighborhood, they migrated. They were part of that second migration from the South. And so, for them, professionalism meant like being a lawyer, being an engineer, being a school teacher, an accountant. Like those were professional degrees. And you did the other things too.
Yeah.
But for me, I was kind of like in that world between art and technology all the time. I was pushing the envelope, so I would end up designing things all the time, whether it was like a product or whether it was experience and services. But I also just loved the part of like just learning.
Yeah.
And so because of that upbringing and being on Lake Michigan and my parents being, therapists and like that psychology and behavioral, it really propelled me into being more of service to other people as well as myself, because I had to do a lot of self-reflection at an early age, being a child of two therapists.
I'm a therapist.
You get those.
And my
questions.
baby, I have gotten on her last nerves, I'm sure. She's 19, y'all. I have gotten on her last nerves.
Yes. So I feel like all of those things, like with art, science, and design, and then like where we at, like now, being 24 years into the 21st century, it just really positioned me to be the type of person that I am, and to be able to engage and work, and also be like just a good, like a really deep listener that also wants to create action.
Yeah.
So human-centered design, like when I went to design school, like I was designing most of my life, but I was in the tech field. But I wanted to become a different type of person or a different type of designer. So I decided to go to design school, and I was very specific about what design schools, because most people think like, oh, you're a designer, like you design clothes. Are you an industrial designer? Are you a graphic artist? And I'm like, no, I'm like an integrative designer. Like I'm a systems designer. Like I design like ecosystems, and I help people like figure things out, or I make things more joyful, or we just go through a healing process to get to someplace.
Yeah.
To remove a lot of barriers in the thinking when you're trying to like be strategic and plan a lot of things out. And so when I came into systems design, I just learned a lot about like wicked problems. Like wicked problems are like what our whole world is made up of. When you look at capitalism, patriarchy, white supremacy, all of those interlocking integrated systems. And a lot of times it's not one solution that helps you get liberated from those type of systems. And so I wanted to be that type of designer, to be like, oh, okay, well, I could be working on this project here and it hits the system in this way, or this other project hits this system anywhere. So I'm working like on multiple solutions, not just giving like recommendations or advice. Like I'm actually there with the community members who pretty much know the problems. They know how to like work them through and work them out. And so there's like, you have to look at the like you have to look at people's humanity when you're in these spaces trying to solve problems or make something beautiful or envision something different. And so human-centered design, I'm more like systems, because I also like to look at ecosystems and technology, because a lot of times the technology, or like the things that we think are technology, like the computers or like, the mics.
Yeah.
The technologies is really like how we view things and the questions that we ask, and like how do we get from one point to another. And so the technologies can be very different, especially from a Black Indigenous space. So with human-centered design, where you're looking at things from a human perspective, a lot of times within our system, because it's so wicked, I have to ask like, well, whose humanity are you speaking about? And
That's such a powerful question to ask, right? And whose humanity is not represented in this space? And what humans do we ultimately need to be talking to so that we can find the right size solutions? And I love what you said, that you were ultimately born to be a designer. You recognized early on that the way that you saw the world was very much rooted in design-based thinking. And your parents, right, supported you in exploring that, which defied the traditional ways of being, because it's like, well, what are we talking about? You want to be a human designer. Is that gonna make you enough money?
Well, they didn't quite support that, but they supported questions.
Yeah, that's good.
Asking questions.
Yeah, and which human design is really rooted in a lot of questioning, essentially, right? It's probably relentless when it comes to questioning, knowing that there's always going to be more questions to ask, even when we feel like we have resolve.
Yeah, and like a lot of times when you get in the classroom, they'll say like, "Oh, there's no right question." I mean, there's no like right answer, right question. But a lot of times within the systems, there is a right question, but you got to ask enough questions of yourself and the other people that you're in the space with to be able to see that.
So what I really appreciate about this, and this is really, it encapsulates what this series is all about, right? Alchemizing Trauma for Community Impact, which is really about doing the internal work of self. And so even as a Black woman, who is trained in human design, who has been shaped by all kinds of things that has given you a positive sense of self and has helped you see the beauty in people who look like you and the beauty in the world, it still merits you continuously questioning yourself, because we're all still products of this system.
Oh, I was just in a community meeting maybe like a couple weeks ago. I'm working with a national organization that's launching a journal. And we were just asking ourselves about questions when we talk about like team dynamics. And I'm like, well, remember, we come from a oppressed system. So like, how are we like decolonizing our minds sometimes when we're interacting and we're saying something, like before we kind of like react to something that happened, or maybe like you notice that there's different reactions from someone when you're like engaging with them. A lot of times you don't know how they showed up. Number one, you don't know what went on all day. You don't know that unless you ask and you do some type of grounding in the space to get everybody like together and on the same page. Yeah, you don't know, and so like you have to approach you have to approach life a little bit more like loving and kind.
Yeah.
Nice. I just,
Kind. How about like maybe in the words of like Brene Brown, right? Clear is kind. And in order to get to the clarity, in order for us to be kind, it means that essentially we have to slow down our work. We have to slow down the process. Because in order to have those questions explored, it means there's a level of generative thinking that is consistently at the baseline of the work.
oh, all the time, because even when I speak to other designers, like I know design has ruined a lot of things within our society, like a lot of things. And it's due to the lack of questioning or like asking, or every project that I'm on, I always talk about the assumptions that we have, which is very uncomfortable for many people. They don't like to like challenge their assumptions. I was like, well, that's how we're going to get through this, because we have to put the assumptions out, because that's our internal biases, and we have to like design against it if we want it to be, more open, breathing, and equitable for other people to be able to engage and not like break something. Because a lot of times design does break a lot of things.
Yeah, well, and I appreciate that you're normalizing, knowing that we have this propensity to repel when we're being questioned, right? And particularly when we're being questioned in association with the self, right? And I think what you're doing through your work is you're saying this is a normal part of the design process, that we've got to examine self, and we have to examine whatever it is that we're attempting to do in connection to self, to ensure that we're doing this in the most humane possible that's going to be good for the people.
Yes. Yeah.
And so talk to us about, how do you slow it down and cut through some of the resistance that shows up when people are being forced to question themselves constantly?
Well, number one, when I wake up, I really have to like be still and calm and like clear a lot of things up, because I know my day is gonna be like nonstop.
Come on, girl. I had one of those days. I had to pray a lot today.
And where I use my the Black Indigenous side of my work, like I have a design process or engagement process that I follow all the time. Like I go through it. One step is based upon the Congo cosmogram, and I hold space with others. And a lot of times when we're doing engagement or we're creating or making things, we step over that like holding space process.
Yeah.
Because holding space allows us to really like let go of a lot of things and just actually be present with that person, to be able to hear actually what's going on. Like you're actively listening, you're deep listening. Once that happens and you go through that process, and sometimes it depends on the person, it depends on the project, it depends on the environment we're in. It could take, it could take less than 3 weeks, or it could take like several months. But when I'm holding space with other people, there's other things that's happening and other tools that could be used within that holding space time. But that's like a sacred time where it's just you and that person, or you and that team. When the trust starts coming from the listening, you then go into like remembering. And that's where you can do a lot of bearing witness with other people, where they're sharing with you like the trauma or the harm that has taken place, on like why something is a problem or not, or why haven't they envisioned, something different, or if they want to like beautify something like a home or something like that. Like you gotta like remember, like, and hear how people are pulling back accounts of their life and like how they're positioning themselves. Once I go through those 2 stages, I'm able to be more creative now. With the group or the individual, there's this openness and this trust that has been established. There's some reciprocity going on. And then I'm able to, say like, hey, let's look at this. Like I'm able to facilitate the process in some kind of way.
Yeah.
With the group. In my last step, which I always talk about, is letting go. Like you gotta let go at some point, even if it's the idea, like a lot of times, when we look at ideas, at some point you gotta let it go into the world. You can't hold on to it.
And which is really rooted in grief work, right? Because I think that sometimes we can be so attached to what we think it's supposed to look like, or what we want it to look like, that blocks us from being able to tap into the creativity that lies in all of us. But I think the attachment itself, like, we get fueled from the attachment. So the fact that you're helping to support people in detaching, in which is a form of grieving something, right? Whenever we're letting something go. Yes. And so I really value this 3-part process, which speaks to the slowing down in order to speed up. And so oftentimes we want to speed up. This is me too. I want to speed up. I want to do it all. I want to do it now. I want to do it as expeditiously as possible. But what you're challenging us, and I don't know if you realize you were doing that, you're challenging me, and I imagine the audience hears it too, is to say how important it is for us to slow it down over and over and over again. And also a recognition that even when we find a solution, that process, that 3-pronged process that you talked about, continuing to carry that in every single space that we're in, right? So I imagine that when you're in meetings, and I would love for you to talk about a couple of your projects just to illustrate it for the audience, so that, because human design is everything, right? Design, like you said, is everything. But I think it's so important that we check ourselves every step of the way to make sure that the solutions that we're putting forward are not incongruent with the relationships that are important to be established. Because oftentimes there's no relationship, there's just execution, there's just solution. There's just thinking that we know what's best because of our training, because of our experience, whatever that might be. But when we're talking about curating solutions in communities, and even when we live in communities, it doesn't mean that we necessarily know what is the right solution, irrespective of that community, because it's one voice, it's one perspective. And I hear you saying that when you're doing the systems work, you are building relationships across the board with the right players through asking the right questions so that you can ensure that you've collected enough of the right information and you've built enough of the right relationships before you even begin to execute, irrespective to the design.
Yeah, because the implementation of it, like the planning is daunting. A lot of people don't like to plan. Some people like to just execute, and that's fine. I feel like if that's who you are, then that's who you should say that this is how I want to be part of it. I want to be part of the implementation. Or no, I want to be a part of the planning. Or no, I want to be part of both of them. You have to go through all of those things because when it's time to implement, which is letting go, it's something you putting the idea out there, you're executing it, you're getting it done. And then you got to talk about, then you think about like how you're going to sustain this within the ecosystem.
Yeah.
And another way of looking at it is like change and transformation is supposed to happen every day. It happens so much in nature. And we are, a lot of times society, I'm not saying everyone, because when I look at myself, I see one of 10,000 people that may feel and think the way that I do. I'm not alone ever.
Yeah.
So when you look at those type of things, like in the change and transformation, you can't just do it alone. Like you cannot just change. Like the world isn't built like that. Ecology isn't built like that. Agriculture isn't built like that. Like it's built onto so many microcosms and and things and organisms within the system that helps things to grow, and it takes time for that to happen, and so does human development.
Yeah. Well, and I don't want to miss what you said earlier, that at the core of this is about love. And so in order for people to transform the world, right, love is really at the root of that. And this is why doing the internal work along with the external work of building community, of bringing people together, of having these meaningful conversations, slowing down the process enough. And so when people say, and when people are doing work with people and they say things like, I don't like people, I'm like, oh, whoa, wait a minute. We got to start there.
Well, and then I also feel like, how many times do you ask people what is their definition of love?
Not enough. Not enough. And even when most of us, how we conceptualize love is not actually the root of what love is. I like to use Bell Hooks' definition, which didn't come from her. It came from someone else's work, but that is really about the emotional and the psychological embetterment of another human.
Oh, I love Bell Hooks.
I know. You got to read all about love, honey, if you haven't read it. Okay.
Love ethic here.
Okay. Hey, I'm going to have to read that too.
It's a deep love ethic here when she talks about that. Like, everything like when she speaks about community, I understand what she's talking about, where like, even though she was positioned in like this rural community on the East Coast, and here we are in the Midwest, in Detroit, the urban agriculture capital of the world, Motown, everything. Like, come on, fashion, music. It just says a lot. Just being
what hasn't Detroit influenced? I was literally just talking about this with someone.
I don't know. Like when again, I'm from Muskegon Heights, and it's all the way on the other side of But we would drive here just to say, hey, we in Detroit, we about to buy some clothes, we about to do this, we about to go to a rave, we about to do something, because we're engaging with people that look like us.
Yes.
That move like us, that is built like us. And so, that's why I think like where I'm situated, a lot of my work does revolve around like a lot of things in Detroit, but it also revolves around the state of Michigan as well. Yeah. And so when we talk about love, like when I work with community groups, like I ask people, what does love mean to them? it demonstrates a lot of like where they are in their psyche and how they're bringing their whole selves, if they are and if they're not. And we talk about those things like it's uncomfortable for a lot of people.
Well, because think about it. I mean, across our lifespans, how many people have asked us that kind of question? We don't have enough conversations about love, let alone really understanding what it means to really love thyself and what it means to really love the world and what it means to love everything in it.
Yeah.
Right. And so I so value your unique approach to the work, but yeah, it's simple. Like, what is more powerful than love? There's nothing.
No, yeah, not like you cannot learn about the depths of love without being in community. And community is so important. This is how important it is that our society that we're living in has reduced our community to neighborhoods. They're looked at as neighborhoods now. See, community has a much, much deeper and like economic development standpoint. Like when you look, community is like, you know who controls the food, you know who controls the water, you know who controls what comes in and out of your system, you know what's going on, you know, with the septic tanks, like you know what's going on, and then you live in that community and you give back to that community through the businesses, through the churches, through the organizations, through the schools. Like you have to know what's going on everywhere if you actually living in a community to feel like that you're there to give service to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I love that you talked about how, and not to sound redundant, that in order to really understand love, we have to do it in the context of community, right? Because the internal love is really about the outpouring of love. And so again, from a cyclical standpoint, starting with the self, continuing with the self over and over again, but also being immersed in community, talking to people in community, existing in community. And even that can seem like out of touch for people.
Oh, yeah. Like I just came back, like last week, I went to the Detroit Food Commons. They have a concert series called like Freedom Sounds. And it was this, oh my God, this amazing ensemble. It was a Black woman. I wish I knew her name offhand. She put together this wonderful ensemble, and everyone that was in the ensemble, including her, was from Highland Park. I had no idea. Like, I heard of her at Highland Park. I know when the street signs change. I know there's a couple of farms there that I go to and purchase things from. But the storytelling through the music and through the poetry, and then like community members recording, sharing like the deep history of Highland Park and why some people just refuse to leave.
Yeah.
Like, they would tell through the music how beautiful it was before the flight, like the blight, how beautiful, and like how like people wanted to live there and how they took care of the community, and then even how they're still standing now taking care of it outside of the blight and the gentrification that's coming up in there. Like that's what community is like, when people like they choose to stay and they choose to build and they choose to connect because this is their home.
Yeah.
It's a deep love there. And it was so much love in that music.
Oh, I wish I would have been able to listen. And it's something that I'm definitely going to stay tuned into. And before we get into the next exploration, I really value what you're saying, because I think sometimes the world can deem things invaluable, but the only value that we have to put on things, as long as somebody is saying, this is a valuable place, this is the history here, this is the legacy here, we're working to keep this community alive, because this is a community that was rooted in love, that is still rooted in love, and it deserves to be nurtured and cultivated. And it deserves to be a place where we're illuminating our talents, where we're sharing our arts, where we're sharing our stories. And it gives us a deeper appreciation about what community actually means. And I know that we get to define for ourselves what community is. But I think it speaks to the beautiful work that you do and being able to even see where the beauty lies, right? And so I imagine that in your work, this is not a deficit model for change, right? Mm-hmm. This is very much rooted in strength-based, the strengths of the people and the voices of the people and the talents of the people.
And the joys.
And the joys of the people, right? Because joy is something that we still don't talk about enough. And I came across a study recently that struck me that looked at, about 180 cities across the country and looked at 26 happiness factors. And, source always matters, but the outcome from this source, which happens to be Wallet Hub, said that Detroit ranked the lowest for joy, for happiness in the country. And so I sat with that, right? I'm sitting with that. I'm asking myself the questions around, is this relevant? If I asked Detroiters, would they think the same thing? What does it actually mean to be happy? Who gets to decide what the benchmarks are for happiness, right? But I think that's in part the work that you do as a human design thinker.
Yeah.
So talk to us about, to make it really plain for the audience, what are 2 projects that you're working on right now where you're using this human design thinking?
So I'll talk one. I love working with my elders. I love intergenerational work, period. Mm-hmm. But it's this one project I'm working with a couple of other consultants. Sometimes I work on projects with other consultants because I love it.
Yeah.
Because we grow and build stuff together.
Because you're rooted in love. You want to be with the people to help you design some shit, right?
We design it and we get paid together. It's beautiful.
That's amazing. Who doesn't want to get paid, right, to do good work?
It's called Change Works, and we were contracted with the Ann Arbor Housing Commission, where they obtained several elderly community apartments from a private owner, and the city of Ann Arbor has never oversaw a elderly community, so they're learning about this. They purchased it sometimes over COVID, and it was a lot of fallout. I mean, it was just a lot of fallout overall, especially with the elderly communities, because I worked on another project in Lansing when it came to 2 elderly communities where I was designing, figuring out how to get them food, how to get them their necessities in a way if something like this happens. So it was easier for me to come up into this space where they're trying to build their culture again, because they lost the culture. Now they got to build a culture back up because they got these laws that they have to abide, but the tenants are wait a minute. Community members, they're wait a minute. This was a community before, now it's not. And it was all these issues. And so we came in to help a lot with their organizational strategy and their culture change. And it's been over a year. We have these meetings, but we also talk about, conflict management, conflict resolution. We help create values for the community, so they have shared language, shared understanding of when they come up in here, this is how we proceed. There was also different hidden biases that we figured out came from, because it is the city and now they're accepting Section 8, and so there were some biases between some of the residents that are well kept and they're able to afford the housing, and then those who aren't. And we unveiled a lot of things, and we're coming to a close to that project towards the end because it was for a year. And we did change there was some significant change that did happen with having us there and navigating that change with not only the staff but also the community, the Laurie Terrace residents. They're still appreciative of it, and they've been using a lot of the tools that we share with them. And we also bring in other people that are like not just us, but they're staple in the community that can help them out with like, food assistance. They got a social worker now that's there to help navigate with their contracts, because we had to look at like, okay, once you become a resident, what happens? What happens if some life change happens as well? Like, does that mess up the community? Because a lot of people are like, where does this person go? Where does this person go? Because they're elderly and they're thinking about life in a totally different way.
Yeah.
And when people aren't there, they don't see anybody and no one's sharing with it. Like it's just a lot of grief and a lot of life changes that happen within that space. And we were challenging the staff to see like, okay, this is a business, but how do you run it in a humane fashion?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And now what about a project that you've worked on in Detroit?
What project? Which one do I want to talk about? I did one. Oh, a big one that I did. It was called Shop Detroit Farms. This was when I was in my graduate studies, when I was looking at how do you get food to people who are sheltering in place. So I got to work with Oakland Avenue Urban Farm, which I love.
Shout out.
I know Miss Jerry and her team are amazing. And then I also got to work with D-Town Farm as well to help set up their online ordering system and to like figure out mechanisms on like how people can order and just pick up and drop off. That was really interesting because it gave me a lot of like deep grounding in developing my design process on like how they look at food, how they're situated, because they're both Black-owned farms, but they have different focuses.
Yeah,
but they work well together too. And so figuring out a sustainability plan with their technology, with their people, with training, getting farmers on board to be able to want to like share their food. I learned a lot about, systems. I learned a lot about urban farming from both. I learned a lot about love and commitment and rigor.
Yes.
As well, from working with them on the project. And then I got to meet so many different other people, other farmers who saw my work that they also wanted to work with me too. So
it sounds like it's just fantastic. And so do you find yourself bringing like-minded individuals and systems together, like in the case of these two farms doing work in Detroit?
Well, it depends.
Yeah.
It depends on the project. With this project, it was a urban agriculture internship, and they needed something and I knew how to build it.
Yeah.
And so they were like already trying to figure it out together. I mean, and that's the thing for me as a designer. I'm a servant leader. And so I work with communities, like they know their solutions. And so I'm only here to amplify and galvanize those community solutions and try to like make them become a reality.
Yes. Yes.
And remove the barriers.
That's the design part.
Yeah, that's
right?
me facilitating.
Yeah.
And helping them get through it. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So talk to us about how you infuse Black and Indigenous practice, right? I know that that's a foundation for everything you do, for how you show up in love, how you approach every single project. So talk to us about, at a foundational level, how is Black and Indigenous at the focal point?
Well, when I said I wanted, like when I was in the tech world doing my thing, and I eventually became like this learning experience designer, I felt like if I was gonna do my service, like my service on this earth, and do it justice and help create something new, I had to use our own tools, like Black and Indigenous. I had to use our tools because the old tools, they don't work.
Yeah.
Those 20th century tools don't work. Audre Lorde says it best, you can't use the master's tool to bring down the master's house. You can't do that.
Come on.
And so I had to go through a lot personally when it came to relearning. Like, I couldn't take a flight to go to some, country in Africa. So I tried to like read as many books from African authors, also Black women, Black women in North America. I use a lot of my methodology is grounded in that deep love ethic where like rematriation, where you looking at everything from the core and from the center and making it more natural. And I wanted to be myself when I was going through the experience, especially when I was going to design school. Like, I was the first black woman to ever get that degree from University of Michigan. Like, but I'm not the last.
Come on now, I love it. Somebody's got to pave the way
because they saw what I did, and so others follow suit. But before there was no Black person or Black woman getting an integrative design degree, and I was just like, wait a minute, where's the Black designers at?
And do you think it's because we didn't know that this body of work existed?
See, design is really different from all the disciplines because it's infused in all of them.
Exactly. I mean, you named it at the beginning of our conversation, right? Like, design is at the root of everything. But to approach a concentration, right, a learning pathway that is rooted in human design thinking, do you think that that's a newer concept for people?
No. I just believe a lot of what has been done before is now coming to surface in different ways through our DNA and through the timing of the system. And I wanted to choose to find the pebbles that my people left behind to say, remember this.
Yes.
Remember we did this. Remember how this was created or born, or like also listening to myths, like African myths, because they're much different than Western myths. Our African myths are like, they tell stories, they're allegories, they help us become better people. They help us look at things in different ways and they always telling you a story about remember, this is what happened in the Nile, or this is what happened in New Orleans. Listening to our myths helps me out a lot because I use them as resources to say okay, well, this is what happened. This is where we're at. So how do we get to the future that we want where we're at?
Yeah.
Even though we know this historical context. And sometimes there's tools that have already been embedded to help heal us, just like in nature. There's natural things to heal us.
I mean, just being in nature helps the body to heal itself.
But even the animals know better sometimes than us, where they'll go out, just for instance, a cat, and the cat is sick. Some people want to take it to the vet, but the cat will go outside and it will find the right plant to eat, very instinctively and naturally to eat. Now, we're not animals, we're human beings, and so there's natural things out here, it's just there's a lot of natural things out here that have been created, and I've learned that by studying the food system so much, because food is the first economy. We have to remember that everything is based upon the food. The food is used as war. And when we talk about food justice, we're not just talking about the food. We're talking about infant maternal health. We're talking about how people are getting locked up in prisons. We're talking about housing. We're talking about workers' rights. All of that is infused to be in a better way of life.
Yeah.
And so when you're looking at it from a human perspective, that's what I'm saying. I just be looking at people okay, when we start doing the human-centered design, what's your love ethic? And what humans are you speaking about?
Yeah, I really, really value that it's clear that you're taking us back to the root, right? When we think about Black and Indigenous practice being your framework, this is about taking people back to the roots and helping them to remember that food is a vehicle for so many things. And that the solutions to, and I love what you said, right? Like, why would I, essentially not use this framework? These other frameworks don't work.
No, and we have I don't feel like this, I think Baba Leak said this. He was just like, when you come into the food system, is either you come in it and you want to be in it, or it finds you. It found me.
Yes.
Although it has been part of my life most of the time.
Yeah.
Like, it finds you. And so these natural patterns that I'm calling out, because they're natural patterns that we as Black people go through. We just don't call it holding space. We might not call it remembering, and maybe we do. When we talk about generative, we talk about being creative, and then the letting go part. Like, these are natural cycles that I saw and I didn't know until I was working with an African artist. He kept saying, that looks like a Congo symbol, the living ethics of a Congo symbol. And I started looking it up, and I was like, I had never seen it before, but that's what, from my studies and me working with so many people over time and how I wanted to come up with my design framework, it was exactly that. So it's in us. We're taught that it's not in us. We're taught that we have to go find it outside of us, but no.
Yeah. This is a great segue into what you named earlier, which is about you co-creating equitable food systems across Michigan. And I would love for you to talk about how food systems can address historical trauma in marginalized communities like Detroit.
I mean, where do I begin with that one? You have to start with the policies. I mean, there's been several policies, like large policies, dating back to 1619, that have been put in place to harm us in many, many different ways, whether it's Blacks, Native Americans, Asia Pacific Islanders. There's policies that are put in place that causes a lot of harm and breaking throughout. And then when you go over time, when the policies aren't addressed, say for instance, I think it's it's an ordinance in Detroit, the livestock ordinance. People have been having livestock in Detroit. I don't know how long. Hey, they were having livestock in Detroit when it wasn't called the Midwest. It was called the Great West.
Wow.
When people were migrating over here.
Take us back, Queen.
And we were coming over here to Michigan, and people was settling up. People and it was professionals. Professional people. They could be a dentist. They could be a banker, or they could own a store. They had a farm, though. They had farms. That was part of the pride of being a person living on this earth. Like, they were able to grow. They were able to grow their own food.
Yeah.
And now you're telling me that there's an ordinance on it? Like, really? But I believe that ordinance should come from the people. It should come from the people who live in the city, who live in those areas, and they should be able to, to live.
Yeah.
Nowadays, I mean, look at the inflation with the food, and then when you go into the grocery stores and they want to base everything off of grocery stores, you don't know if it's real or fake.
Listen, and even, I hate to say this, right? Even sometimes at some of these farmers markets, right? We don't know. We don't know.
Yeah, I know my farm.
Well, listen, you're gonna have to school us on where we need to be, right?
Yeah.
Because let's be real. Sometimes people just slap a label on there and make it seem like
they might buy it from somebody.
Right? They buy it and then they slap a label on it, and it's like, oh, you didn't grow this, right? But for your average person, they may not know it. And so I love that, you're talking also about, the integrity of it, because everybody is not approaching this with a level of love, which is connected to the love part.
Oh, no.
Right?
You're right. Oh, I just think that's despicable. I do.
It's so deceptive.
It is, and
right?
that's what I'm saying. Wicked systems, wicked thoughts, wicked problems, wicked systems.
Yes. And your work is really countering that. And I'm sure that we could continue to talk about, how food systems can address historical trauma, but I think the audience, I think they get it. I think they get it.
Yeah, and also like one last thing,
Mm-hmm.
when you talk about the trauma, like food is such an amazing experience. Like when you're eating like good, clean, nutrient dense food, and you're talking and you're laughing, you're engaging, you're strategizing. I mean, I learned about strategy from my grandmother's table, where her door was always open to the community. It was like this big old table, and people would come in, eat, and they would talk about solutions.
Yes.
They would talk about how to resolve things. All that stuff was done at the dinner table.
Yeah, I mean, so food is it's the antidote, right? Like if we're putting the right kind of foods in our bodies, right? We're fueling it in the way that it needs to be fueled, which in part fuels our brain energy.
Yes.
And when we're making connections over good food, we're curating solutions to some of the deepest problems. We're connecting on a deeper level with people. I've never been in a space where I've been around people and eating good food where we don't go deep, right?
Yes.
In some way. And so I really, really appreciate you making this work of food justice so much bigger than just people being able to access food. Like what you're saying in part, like food is love, food is life.
It's much bigger than just the production. I mean, production is like essential.
Yeah.
But it's tied, like it's integrated in so many things.
Yes. And it's all of the beautiful things that manifest as a result of being able to engage in high quality, high vibrational food and all the ways that it nourishes us. And so I'm curious now about how policy change, because you've done a lot of that work in association with the Michigan Local Food Council Network. Talk to us about how policy change can act as a lever for healing and empowerment, especially for communities of color.
It's really time for us to be more civically engaged than we've ever been in our lives.
Come on.
Like this continent, America was built on civic engagement.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now we're seeing it play out like very foully. But what we can do is look at because we can change a lot of things locally.
Yes. Come on, talk about it.
But it takes us being in community. It doesn't take like one person, but it's you being organized with the body to be able to go in and say, hey, why are they still putting Dollar Generals on every, what's going on here? Like, when you come into your local space, those zoning laws, that's where everything is, decided upon within zoning. Like, what businesses, what apartments get built up, how they zone off, highways and streets. That's... If you live in that neighborhood, you have a civic responsibility to know what's going on there.
Yeah.
You have a civic obligation to go into those city council meetings and say, or those committee meetings and say, no, hold on, I need to know more about this before you do this. Food policy councils, that's the origin. If you look at some of the history, the beginning history that some people may have documented, they say it started with a bunch of college kids and a professor, but we've been doing food work for centuries. Especially us as mothers. We've been taking care of the house, making sure people are fed, or working with other community members. I know with my grandmother, again, she came from the migration from the South, and within our neighborhood that she lived in, she talked to everybody. We knew who did. If somebody didn't have food, everybody came together and made sure that the person had food to eat.
Wow.
And set up a schedule. Our civic engagement, they taking out civic engagement. It's so imperative for food policy councils to be at the forefront of understanding and knowing what is going on in their food shed.
Yeah.
They have that's their responsibility, to be the people to be like, oh yeah, this is happening here.
Mm-hmm.
Do they have to know everything? No, you come together as a body of knowledge. Like food policy councils are think tanks. That's what they should be doing. They can do some active things on the ground, and they can do some things in municipal spaces, but they're that like mediator of like knowing what's going on the ground and how do we push it within the municipal space to be able to change the ordinances or the policies and the laws or the process.
Yeah.
Or give a resolution in the space.
Yeah, and it's so critical that we are looking local, but many times we're thinking about things on a national level and versus understanding that a lot of the ways that we're impacted by things like food injustice actually happens right at the local level. Yes. And even though, we talk about often that the system is working the way that it was designed to, but we get an opportunity to interrupt it, right? We get an opportunity to latch into these bodies of work that it's happening right here within the Detroit community. People are fighting for food justice every single day.
Yes.
Including you, right? There are a lot of players, right? You here.
I'm here.
Okay. So I'm curious about, as the first racial equity chair for the Washtenaw Food Policy Council, what challenges have you encountered in addressing racial inequities within the food system? And what strategies have you found effective in overcoming these barriers? Ooh. Right? I mean, we're talking about Washtenaw, but we're going to put the spin on Detroit too, right? Because these things happen everywhere, right?
Yeah. Detroit is different. Like, again, it's the origin, like the formations, like the formation of the Washtenaw Food Policy Council, which is probably like the second longest food policy council, Detroit being the first. I'm going to speak more about Detroit because Detroit Black Community Food Sovereignty Network, they started the origins of what you see the Food Policy Council be like. It was a grassroots effort. They saw the need when they were building their institutions, their community institutions, and they saw a need to be able to understand what's going on with policy and be able to shape it.
Yeah.
And so that's how the Detroit Food Policy Council came into light, with many different people sitting at the board pushing for it. Washtenaw is very different. Washtenaw is a working group of the county commissioners. So it's a part of the city government, whereas Detroit is more standalone. It's a nonprofit, and it was
created by the people and it's being pushed by the people.
Amen.
And that is a huge differentiating factor. Yeah. So thank you, right? So we could certainly talk about addressing racial inequities within Detroit, but I imagine that considering it was created for and by the people, we own it. We own it here in Detroit. And whereas in Washtenaw County, the people don't quite own it yet.
It's different because it's a group of us that come from very different sectors, who many of us may get paid to do this work. So it's just not like volunteer, because a lot of times, food policy councils are volunteers based,
Which I actually think we have a real opportunity to make them not so.
Right.
Because people need to be paid for their expertise. Yeah. But that's it's not really a whole nother conversation. It's connected to inequity.
Oh yeah, we do get paid. It's not a lot, but it is something that, like, we come to our meetings, we get paid for to come to our meetings. But it's also, again, it's coming from the municipal space. But what kind of works for us in a way is that a lot of us do work in community rooted institutions, some of us, and then some of us come straight from institutions.
Yeah.
Right? And so it is different. Like, it depends on what type of people you get. A lot of times, sometimes we got community members. Like, we got community members that sit on the council. We also have like a disability justice person. Mm-hmm. I do racial equity. Then we got economic development. So everybody comes with their level of expertise to be a part of this think tank. to be able to know like what is really going on within the food shed. But what propels us is the community members within Washtenaw. We have policy action teams. We have various policy action teams. We have one for farming, inclusiveness when it comes to food. We also have one for food access. We also have a pollinators one. And so like community members that aren't a part of the council, they're a part of the policy action teams. And so what they do is we're there to support their work and what they're trying to do to remove roadblocks within the system.
And so how have you addressed inequities when they've shown up in that space?
Well, I'm a good facilitator. So sometimes I let people be, and I might like challenge them with a question. But again, a lot of people don't like questions, but I just ask questions.
Yeah.
Really. One thing that we did was we did this racial equity audit that I went through all our with a group of people who said, hey, I want to learn how to do this.
Yeah.
This work. I went through a racial equity audit with everyone, and the report is coming out like within the next month. I went through like our policies, our systems as a Food Policy Council, the work we've done within the last 5 years, and we went through some questions that I asked of the committee. Well, I'm not gonna say committee, the design team. That's better. And we went through, and we were like, after we got through it, it took us several months because people were like, oh my God, I didn't know this, and I'm part of the Food Policy Council. Like, it was things that they learned they didn't know, and then it was things where they were putting on a new lens to look at it from an equity perspective, because a lot of times people say the word equity, but I was like, what does that mean to you? Like, you have to have shared language to be able to work with other people to move the needle into a different space. And so what that did to me, it gave, it empowered and built capacity within our Food Policy Council to be able to do this type of work. And it's not just me.
Yeah.
And they're able to go out and facilitate and say, hey, wait a minute, no, here's some questions we need to ask based upon our report. These are the actions that we choosing to do as a group. And even our policy action team members, like, they give input on those on the report as well. Like, I don't leave other people out. Hopefully within maybe like the next 2 or 3 months, we're going to present it to the city in front of the county commissioners and say, like, this is how we're choosing to move in action. A lot of things has been going on in Washington. Like, we lost our I don't think they call it, we lost our equity officer because of all the DE&I stuff that's going on. And it's not just going on in Washington, but it's also going on the other side of the state. You know, all this doubling down on DE&I, which I think is profusely like, it does not make any sense, because DE&I was created for leaders who don't know how to use an equity lens. It wasn't created just for the math. It was created for these leaders to get their stuff together.
Yes.
And to be able to lead and train their people to move in a different way. And if they're not moving in a different way, well, then here's some violations. It was some laws, some protocols that were put around D&I, but now they're trying to like act like it's not here and there. So it could get challenging because people don't want to change. They are here to maintain the system. They don't want to give up power or share. And what I do, I just shift and ask questions.
Yeah. So it's so powerful. That's actually in one of my favorite books, which is by Pam Grout. She wrote E Squared and E Cubed. And she said, I have I have two responsibilities in life: to be curious and to ask more questions.
Ooh, I like.
And ultimately, God will do the rest.
Oh, it works out. It works out.
And so I love that you embody that in your work. And you gave us such a potent example of the slowing down to speed up. And that, when you talk about interrupting inequity, the fact that you knew to facilitate a process that took months for you to do, but you knew how critical it was to paint a picture about what the realities are, about helping people to really have the same meaning around what it means to embody these particular things. And now, what do we do with what we know?
Yeah, it's a lot of brain work that goes into behavior change.
Oh my gosh, let me tell you. I had to learn early on as a therapist that just because people talk about change doesn't mean they actually want change. Just because they talk about change doesn't mean that they're actually ready for change. And the questioning helps to cut through all of that, right? Let's get to the truth of the matter. And with the idea, of course, of building bridges, right?
Yes.
But let's tell the truth. I was just having a coffee meeting with someone.
Be honest and transparent.
Come on. I was literally just, as we get ready to wrap up, having a coffee meeting with someone yesterday. And I said, who gets to tell the truth? And how do we tell the truth?
Oh, I love it.
And how do we honor a place and also tell the truth about place? How do we see the beauty in something and also face some of the dark and the shadow parts of a place, right?
Oh, the shadow.
Come on. And I don't have the answers necessarily, but I think these are in part the important questions that we have to ask ourselves when we are embarking on a journey of transformation for self and transformation for the world.
Yeah, like I'm glad you brought up like shadow work, because I'm about to enter into the stage of where I'm doing some shadow work myself. Like I'm gonna pull back on some of the projects that I focus on. I'm gonna focus on like very small, like short, intimate projects right now, because I have to do my shadow work on creating like tools that need to come out.
Yeah.
And I can only do that by being still and looking at my shadow like, oh, shoot.
And you just named something. And so I love that you're, being forthright about the fact that you're taking some time, right? I mean, you recognize that you have done really amazing work. You have done a lot of internal work along with external work so that you can be successful within your own right, whatever that means, irrespective to the impact that you're creating in the world. But the fact that you know that you've got to go to this next level in your career, in your life, that you've got to slow down yourself. Yeah. And you're applying that human-centered design thinking even to yourself.
I think it'd be a good thing. Like, I feel like it's stepping back. Like this morning when I woke up and I went outside, it was like, the sun was coming up and coming, it was just early morning, and it was so pretty outside. It felt so. We were just talking about like the warmth so early,
just mind blowing.
And even the wind just played a perfect harmony in that, right?
And fall is a little bit different in Detroit, I'm discovering. I'm from Kalamazoo, and I like fall in Kalamazoo, but Detroit fall hits just a little bit different.
Yeah. Kalamazoo is real healy to me. Like it's like yeah. Oh yeah, I can see that. I can see that. And then the water, is different. The water effect. That's what I need to do right now, because I started off building like a lot of these tools, and I do build them for other people, but it's these tools that's inside of me, that need to come out, and I need to see them to fruition on my own. And plus, when you're doing a lot of community work or even institutional work, letting go, taking a break, and then refocusing and going back up in there is just a part of the routine of life. Like, you have to do self-care.
It's so critical.
I'm nowhere near done with anything that I'm here to do. It's just I want to do a little bit more of that little shadow work of shifting and expressing myself in the way that I know I need to. Right now.
Well, I want to celebrate that that is what's calling you, and that you're creating space for it, right? Yes. I was literally just telling my assistant today that, as a wellness company, one of the things that I'm faced with often is my propensity is to like go. even though I have a ton of wellness practices, right? Even though I do Reiki on myself every morning, I'm outside in nature and I'm doing the things that I talk about in practice, but I still have these moments where it's like, okay, this is too much. Why did you take on so much?
Right.
Why are you operating not in concert with the vision that you have for this work? And so that's the work, right? And that never stops, so that we can ensure that we're being the highest version of ourselves and we're doing the highest good in the world.
Yes.
It does require us to consistently slow down. And so I love that that's been a theme throughout our entire conversation.
Yeah.
And that is really the crux of what it means to engage in human design work that is really centered authentically with the self and with the people, irrespective to communities.
Yeah.
And so, Queen, I'm just really, really appreciative of you. As we get ready to wrap up, I would love for you to share just a final piece of inspiration for listeners that have been impacted by community or personal trauma, who want to know more about what they can do to better their lives and to change their communities.
Believe in yourself. Like, take moments to yourself, even at the beginning of the day, and look in that mirror and tell yourself, I love you. I love you. You know, we need that. It's a lot of stuff coming at us when we walk out that door.
Yes.
Like, our home can be our refuge, and sometimes it can't for some. But you know, that's your goal, to make sure your home, your refuge. But when you go out into the world, a lot of times, because the system is just coming at you in so many ways, it's best to know that, you know, you are worthy.
Yeah.
You were born for a reason. And sometimes it's a season that it comes out, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's that sometimes it's the question that, like, changing that question of, like, why is this happening to me, of, like, no, what am I supposed to learn from this? So, like, say I love you. Start your day with good intentions. You know, be grateful. Like, even in those moments of sometimes, like, because sometimes I get like that too, like, especially when I'm, like, in meetings sometime. And some people just like to be in meetings just for the sake of meetings.
Which drives me crazy.
That's the new working
That's
class.
like the bane of my existence.
Yeah, that's the new working class. But, you know, ask yourself, like, you know, what makes you happy? Like, is this worth it? Like, ask yourself questions. Do that shadow work, because that shadow work helps so much. It helps ground you, especially when you're coming against something so harmful like racism or sexism, ageism, or anything like that. You're able to be a little bit more calmer in that space, because you're like, wait a minute, I know who I am. What they talking about?
Come on
What they
now.
talking about? And you know, write out your definition of love. Write it out.
Yes,
Say
and if you
it.
need a little bit of help, right?
Oh,
All About Love can help you,
Yes,
right?
yes.
If you need a little help in that definition. But we already have so much insight that we can start to apply to that.
Yeah, and if, like, for me, if you're out here and you're like, just for me, like, about who I am, and, like, if anyone ever wants to work with me, because Michigan State is just like one contract that I have. I have my own design firm. It's called the Equity and Access Design Firm. It's a group. And I get to work with so many amazing people in different on different projects. It's not just food, but everything is centered on food, because that's the choice that I'm making in my life. Right,
It's your
now.
life's work.
Yeah.
At least for right now, like you said, it's your life's work.
Yeah. It's a good beginning. And you know, if you ever interested in working from a community design perspective or a human-centered design perspective, I'm always here for consultations. I'm always here, like, if you ever want to come to, like, a large design charrette and see how to engage and get to the other side of, like, this is what this is supposed to be, whether it's a product, whether it's an experience, whether it's an event, you know. I'm always here, and to always know that you're not ever alone. You weren't born in this world alone. You're not alone. And just know, like, it's just one of 10,000 of you.
Come on. And we weren't designed to be alone.
No.
Right? Even though we may think sometimes that we're on an island. And I think that's the biggest lie that we accept. And one of the most harmful lies that we accept, because what research has shown time and time again is that one of the greatest indicators of our quality of life has to do with the quality of our relationships. We've got to be in community with one another if we want to live a full, robust life, along with all of the other things, right, that make life sweet.
I mean, and it goes back to that, African proverb. They said it takes a village. Even when we look at the structure of the nucleus family, which, again, that comes from domestication of, like, eugenics and stuff like that. Like, all you need is a husband and a wife and 2 or 3 kids. But that's not real. Like, you need so many people outside of that. It's just not the husband and wife taking care of the children.
Yeah. And the reality is that, you can have a single parent home and be raising, right, really loving, beautiful children that have everything that they need. And you can have 2 parents and you can have the opposite, right?
The family, we have to question who is giving us this information and who's saying that this is what this is, because it takes a village. It takes a community to love, and it takes a village to raise it.
Yes. Oh, I love that. So, Keesa, thank you so much for taking time out, sharing with us this profound framework that is creating so much transformation in the city of Detroit, throughout the entire state of Michigan. And I would love for you to take an opportunity to share with the audience exactly how they can stay in touch with you.
Well, you can contact me through LinkedIn at Keesa V. Johnson. My inbox is open if you're interested. And then if you're interested in learning more, I'll send you my website.
Wonderful. We want to share our immense gratitude for you tuning in today. We hope that the insights shared have opened you up towards new pathways for your healing and your liberation. If either of us can be a support for you, please do not hesitate to reach out. As we get ready to wrap up, if you found value in today's show some love by telling everyone that you know about it. Make sure that you rate our YouTube channel and give us a shout out on any of the podcast platform that you're listening on. And we're always open to hearing from you directly at info@bewellbeautifulpeople.org. If you haven't already picked up my memoir, Me Too, A Therapist's Journey to Heal, Find Liberation and Joy, I invite you to do so at demarrawest.com. And just for tuning in and using code Alchemizing, you get 25% off. The Be Well Beautiful People podcast for this particular series, Alchemizing Trauma for Community Impact, is sponsored by The Love Building, a subsidiary of Allied Media Project, and home for the social justice and creative community right here in Detroit. We're also supported by H&B Building Services, providing top-notch, reliable building services for all your personal and professional needs, and the Lip Bar, natural beauty design for your unique complexion. We'll leave you with the words of Audre Lorde. She's just popular today, sis.
Yes, she is.
Sometimes we are blessed with being able to choose the time and the arena and the manner of our revolution. But more usually, we must do battle where we are standing. Ooh. Until next time, beautiful people. Ashe.